Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So, whether you're stuck in self doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So, grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to encourage you to maybe keep a tissue or two available. We're going to spend a little time talking about grief and what that looks like for us and in our bodies and how we can navigate it really well. I'm going to let Kristen jump right in.
Hey, Jen, good to see you as always. Today, we're diving into a really important, deeply personal topic, which is grief. This has a very profound impact on my life. I've had a lot of grief and loss in my life, so this one is close to my heart. Grief can be the loss of a loved one, a relationship, a job, or even a version of ourself. Grief touches us all in different ways, and yet so many of us struggle to allow ourselves to grieve fully. So I just want to touch on that with everybody.
People often think that grief is just sadness, but it's really so much more. There's so much complexity to it. It's a process. It's not a single emotion. It can look like anger, it can look like numbness, it can look like exhaustion, it can look like guilt. It can even look like shame from feeling grief and also happiness at the same time. Kristen, I love that you pointed out that grief is not just about losing a person from this earthly realm. You can lose it because you lost a relationship, that you can be grieving the loss of somebody from splitting up from a relationship. You can be grieving when you get fired from a job or you have to quit a job that you really like. There's so many areas that grief touches us, and it doesn't have anything to do with death. The other thing that I find myself coaching on a lot is when somebody's caretaking for a long time, they grieve as they're caretaking. So when the death actually comes, it's almost more of a relief. There's still grief there. Don't get me wrong. It's just a little different. It's usually not as intense, is what I've noticed for people. Well, I have a client who is taking care of a parent that has dementia. And she's like, I don't know why I cry. Like, why do I get so emotional? I'm so upset and I can't get over it. And I said to her, you're grieving the loss of the person that parent was. You no longer have that parent that way. And you're grieving all of those things, even though they're still alive. And so I just really wanted to bring that in because I'm sure we will probably talk about it more, but it's definitely something that is very important for people to understand. Kristen, from a therapy perspective, how would you define grief? What would you tell people grief looks like?
It can look like a lot of different things. I would say if we were getting technical, it's the emotional, mental, and sometimes even physical response to loss. It's not linear. It was like the actual stages of grief, and you had to go through them. But it's more of a tangled ball. It doesn't follow a neat little timeline. One moment you might feel okay, and the next, a song or a memory can hit you like a wave, and all of it's normal. One of the biggest misconceptions about grief is that you're supposed to just move on or get over it. I don't know how many times people have heard that. They come in with that all the time. And that's generally from people who aren't as in touch with their emotions. So they put it in a box instead of actually dealing with it. But grief doesn't work that way. You don't move on, you learn to move with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another reason some people just say, oh, just move on, it'll be okay, is because they've never experienced the type of grief. But I also think another myth that Kristen debunked already, which I love, but I'm going to go a little deeper into it, is that grief has the 5 stages. And once you go through them, you're done. It's just never going to happen again. And grief is not a checklist. It's not something you go, oh, yep, I'm through the anger stage, done. I'm through this stage, done. It doesn't work that way. You can go back and forth between emotions for years. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or that you're doing it wrong. I will tell you, I had a favorite grandparent. I had my grandfather pass away from lung cancer on my 16th birthday. He had never had kids of his own. He had married my grandmother right after I was born. I was the pride and joy for him. I was the baby that came into his life. He was incredible and I loved him. Over 30 years later, almost 35, I still think about it on my birthday because he died on my birthday. I still grieve him. I still think about him and I still go, oh, so that was heart wrenching for me. And he's been gone way longer than I knew him. There's nothing wrong with that. Does it make me less of a person? You get to grieve in your own time and in your own way. And like Kristen was saying, it does come in waves, it's not linear. So there could be days where you're fine, you're doing great. And then there's other days where you're like, oh, I can't get over this. I can't get this out of my head. It's okay. Just go with it. Move with it because that's how we do it. Kristen, what is your advice to give someone who's listening who feels like they should be handling grief better?
Yeah, those shoulds, right? Oh, it just creates shame. So that's one word I really try to help people take out of their vocabulary. The first thing you need to do is honor your grief, right? So what does that mean? What does it mean to honor your grief? It's got several components. So allow yourself to feel everything. Grief is not something to suppress. Like I was talking about earlier, people just putting stuff in a box. Feeling it is how you heal. Instead of moving through them and healing, you just continue to pile them on. And so this is where people can get really stuck, is that they're not letting themselves go ahead and feel, or you don't give yourself space and time to do it. My father passed away when I was in the middle of college. And I was like, no, I'm going to go right back to school. It was in the middle of a semester. And I finally had somebody say, don't avoid this. Just withdraw, take the rest of the semester off and move through it and move with it, not just move out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important. And we already talked about this, but don't put yourself on a timeline and don't let anybody else put you on a timeline. You do it in your own time, in your own space. Never feel bad if it keeps coming back up. I always tell my clients, I want you to have the emotion. I just don't want you to live in it. If you can't find a way out of it, call me and I say, Jen, I need to talk to you. If you have the emotion and you feel it for a day, I feel like too is still like, I want you to be able to live your life. I want you to be able to do the things that you want to do and thrive, but don't ignore the emotions, like Kristen was saying, because if you ignore them, it's not going to do any good for anybody. And actually, it's going to be much harder on you later. So, absolutely, just don't think you have to be on a timeline.
Definitely don't let anybody pressure you into a timeline. The next thing is to find safe spaces to express this grief. This could be a place like coaching or therapy. There are specifically grief therapists as well. All therapists are trained to handle grief, but some people specialize in it, and that's their chosen path. I specialize in trauma. Journaling is always good. Also, finding communities. There are grief groups at almost every single church. Finding other humans that are grieving in a healthy way so that you can share your grief with somebody, especially if you're getting pressure from other people to move on. Finding a community where you feel like you're a part of it and that other people get you. I think those are probably the most powerful tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Be sure you're always honoring what you need and what you've lost. Make sure you're doing it in a way that feels right and in alignment with you and who you are. Yeah, absolutely. You can write letters. One of the things that has become big, and when we talked about it during the forgiveness session that we did, the forgiveness podcast, but if you struggled with something like that and it was a loss that maybe you weren't prepared to lose and maybe you didn't ever really make amends with that person, you can write a forgiveness letter. It could be to them, it could be to you, however you need it. And I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that forgiveness podcast because we talked about it. If you ever need help with that, just reach out. I'd be happy to share more. Some people like candles. You can always have things created. I know when my dad passed away a couple of years ago, one of my nieces creates like resin memory stones. We took some of his flowers and different things, and I think we put a picture of him in there. She created this really beautiful little thing. It's a little box, but it sits and it's pretty good sized. My mom has it in her house. Eventually, it will be in my house. I'll probably have one made for her as well. So, yeah, absolutely. Kristen, how do we move forward without guilt?
I think you actually said something about this earlier in the episode. People struggle with guilt or shame when they start feeling happy again after a loss. Maybe they think it's too soon. Maybe it's a caregiver, like you were talking about, and they finally have the loss after they've grieved it during the person's lifetime. And maybe it doesn't take them as long because they've already gone through the whole process, whether it be a death, job loss, or a relationship loss. It doesn't mean that you're forgetting, right? Like you said, your story about your grandfather, you still think about him. You've not had him longer than you had him, and yet it is still impactful. So you've never forgotten. Just remember that grief and joy can coexist. You can laugh again, you can love again, and you can find meaning after a loss. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go down to the practical step. Is that
Yeah.
okay? Yes, absolutely. I would agree 100%. I wanted to offer a small step if you're feeling stuck moving forward, but you don't know how to. A really good way is gratitude. Being grateful for the time you had with them, remembering them in a loving, grateful mindset will really take away some of that guilt and that shame. And I think that's really important. What are some tips you might have, Kristen?
Yeah, gratitude. I feel like gratitude works for just about everything, but gratitude not only for the memories, but also for what that person brought to your life and the lessons that they taught. And I have a lot of gratitude for my dad for all the lessons he taught me and the values he instilled in me. Remembering that has created space for me to heal. Grief is human, right? If we're not feeling grief, that means we just don't care about anything. It's messy, it's painful, but it's also a reflection of deep love for others and for ourselves. So, today, if you're grieving, please remind yourself there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just give yourself grace.
I want to end it there. However, I do always want to remind you guys that if you listen to this and there is someone there that you want to share this with, please feel free to share it. Not everybody's going to hear it the same way, and that's okay. We understand that we can't serve everyone at the same time. But I'm hoping that the people that need to hear it are going to hear it and be a part of it. So feel free to share it. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to let us know anything that you want us to talk about that is around your value and just really loving yourself and putting yourself first.
Thanks for joining us. I really hope that this brought some comfort to you if you've had some loss, and also prepares you for the loss to come, because we all experience them and we all need to be able to deal with it and do it in a healthy way. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.